Happy New Year. Welcome to Telling the Show. We're a different kind of podcast, and you want to know why? Because we have all this life experience and a master's education in screenwriting, and we want to subject everyone to it.
That's right. I'm going to entitle this new episode, New Year, New You.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't give up your day job, because copywriting is its own animal. I haven't seen anyone do a copywriting podcast yet. I'm sure that it's out there.
I'm sure it's out there, but how exciting could that be?
You know what? Maybe we could be guests on that one. And
we could.
And just see what happens.
Break all the copywriting rules in one podcast. That would be my goal.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, because that's a whole other paradigm in terms of writing, completely different. So what do we got here this time, Denise?
Today we're going to be talking, since it is the new year, there's a age-old tradition of resolutions. Whether you believe in them or not, we're just going to be talking about some writers' resolutions.
Right. Yeah, just some ways to motivate yourself in the beginning of the year, because it's like exercise, it's like a job, it's like a lot of things. There's a lot of analogies around screenwriting, but you have to do it. If you're a creative in general, you're going to be doing this stuff anyway, so it's not going to feel like a chore. If it feels like a chore, then you have to think about it differently and approach it in a different way.
100%.
Yeah. I'll never tell you to give up on a creative dream, ever. That's just my personal advice, because there's too many naysayers out there with different reasons of why they're telling you what they're telling you, but only you can have your own, hold your own
interest. Yeah. You have your best interest in heart.
Absolutely.
In your heart.
Not mine, yours.
Yours.
Meaning the audience is yours. We got to get ourselves grammatically correct here.
I'm from Brooklyn. It's gonna come out poorly. Sometimes I'm sorry,
dude. Bust out that accent. In fact, if I sends you in this episode, I encourage, because the Brooklyn accent is one of the most kick-ass that's out there. And I don't have much of a Texas accent, being that I am from Texas and live in Texas. I'm sure somebody expects me to sound like all right.
I do that. I channel Matthew McConaughey often.
There are so many people who channel him and the Wooderson side of who he is. You just keep living. I always wanted him to do the Wooderson thing because he's he does voice overs for the Reliant Energy commercials. Reliant is an energy company, an electric company here in Texas, and I keep wanting him to go, "Are you using Reliant Energy? It'd be a whole lot cooler if you did."
That would be awesome.
That would be okay. That's my. I haven't done enough impressions on the show, but I'm gonna do more now. I promise. I made that promise to you, Denise.
I accept that promise, and I challenge you to do more impressions because I like to laugh. Yeah.
Okay. Well. Okay. Then I'll probably drop Fat B during Logline Thunderdome or something like that. Maybe.
Right.
Maybe it'll be more entertaining that way.
Speaking of Logline Thunderdome, I think we ended last year with a tie.
We did, and I expect you to win this year. 2022 is your year, and I'm being that gracious about it because I'm not worried.
Oh, talking smack.
What is that? That's nobility, not smack talk. Please, lady.
Nobility.
Compose yourself. I mean, shoot.
Why do composers always say compose yourself?
Because we're decomposing all the time, if you really want to get right down to it. So if you've watched our show before, you know that Logline Thunderdome is basically built on this one simple principle, this rule, this ideal, this institution. 2 log lines go in, but only one can survive.
That's right. As much, mirroring life. Only one can make it out.
Well, okay, what are you, a coal miner in the midst of a collapse or something? Jeez.
Let me get my canary and tell you.
Nice. Wow. You can tell we're writers because we're spitballing these kind of quips back and forth.
Absolutely. That's what makes us fun.
Right. But it's different this time, though.
It is different this time. So I wanted to concentrate on, since we're talking about resolutions, a lot of that comes from inspiration. And during the new year, there's always I'm not going to say Hallmark movies, but I'm going to say movies that
schmaltzy.
maybe challenge you or make you feel good or inspire you to change or inspire you to be different. So that's what this one's going to be about.
Yummy. Well, all right.
Yeah.
Okay. So in that instance, if you're going to drop the schmaltz, then ladies first.
All right. I'm actually, yes, go. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Before you do, I do apologize. I just Kanye'd you. But the reason it's different this time is we don't have the beginning of the year. It's just me and Denise. We don't have a guest on this particular episode, so there isn't a judge necessarily of this Logline Thunderdome. So Denise and I are going to judge each other, just like social media on a hot day.
There are so many things I could say, but I'm not going to.
Why are you holding back?
I was going to say, like, judge each other. I judge myself consistently.
Well, there you go. Well, okay.
All right.
Yeah.
But my logline is from actually one of my favorite movies. It's actually one of the movies I watch probably about 2 times a year. I don't have a lot of time. So 2 times a year, this is pretty, but if it comes on, like if I walk into a hotel room and it's on TV, I stop what I'm doing and I watch it. Yeah. And it's not because of the actors or anything. I just love the movie and I love the way it like ramps you up and makes you feel good. So my logline is the true story of a newly appointed African-American coach and his high school team on their first season as a racially integrated unit.
Remember the Titans, huh?
Yes.
Okay.
Love it.
All right. Can I hear the logline one more time?
Sure. The true story of a newly appointed African-American coach and his high school team on their first season as a racially integrated unit.
Okay. So we've got characters, we got concept. It's missing conflict though.
I believe the conflict is suggested as a racially integrated unit.
Yeah, but just because it's racially doesn't mean it's necessarily, it doesn't necessarily come out as a conflict. That's the only thing. So it just may be something like it's maybe one adjective away from really getting that conflict.
Hitting the hammer. I gotcha.
Maybe not necessarily hitting, being heavy handed with it necessarily, but it just seems like it might have needed it. So.
Yeah, I agree. It's not the best logline.
It's more that judging yourself, right?
Yeah, sure.
Well,
what you got for us?
Well, I mean, before we get to that, because mine is not inspirational at all. It's not that kind of story, but I do want to say that, inspirational new beginnings. I love that those movies come along anytime you want. The more soulful movies that have nothing to do with explosions or, painting on an IMAX canvas. Although I love those movies, and that's the kind of movie that I think puts butts in seats. But Grand Canyon by Lawrence Kasdan, I think, is a great one. I was actually reminded of it the other day because not that I know the guy, but I'm on the Facebook friends group for James Newton Howard, who wrote the music for that movie. And his music is very encapsulating. It's beautiful at every turn in the movie because the movie is really about taking a good look around at what's going on and recognizing where you're at and what place you are in your life and reconciling with it. So
that's pretty deep.
It is deep, and I think there's inspiration that comes from that. There's an Amazon movie I want to see that's on that same subject. It's based on a memoir, The Tender Bar. George Clooney directed it.
Yes, with Ben. It's actually what I'm going to be watching tonight. Ironically.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm actually going to be watching Peacemaker because I think John Cena's. It's funny. These guys were dismissed as wrestling entertainers, but damn if John Cena wasn't funny in the Suicide Squad last summer.
Yep,
and
sure was.
And
he wrote his own ticket.
Yeah,
by being who he is. Yeah,
exactly. And he was funny. Like I think he was funnier on Jimmy Fallon than anywhere else in like Suicide Squad. And I've heard mixed reviews about the series, but I love the concept, and I'm going to give it a fair shot as a streaming series where that's concerned. But anyway, back to something just as stark and bloody. Here's my log line. Torn between family and duty, a meticulous police detective investigating a grisly set of racially charged murders must work against the law when he discovers his missing schizophrenic father is the serial killer responsible.
Oh my gosh, I have no idea what that is.
Oh, it's an original.
Oh, well, dang. Okay.
I
I
came
was
out
like,
swinging.
dang. All right. Okay. Hit me again.
Torn between family and duty, a meticulous police detective investigating a grisly set of racially charged murders must work against the law when he discovers his missing schizophrenic father is the serial killer responsible.
Wow, that's pretty deep. Interesting how we both talked about race today. Interesting.
Yeah, and we're both white, so what does that tell you?
What does that tell you? We're
Are we?
empathetic.
Well, maybe unless we're making our own white man's hell. I mean, not to be like self-reverential or anything like that, but
I think so. One, you have a twist in your logline, which I think is totally cool.
Yeah.
There's conflict, there's resolution. I can visualize your inciting incident right away.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. I want to know who this detective is. Like, I want to know more about him just from your logline alone.
Oh, that's cool. I actually think that's the weakest spot in my logline here. The schizophrenic father is interesting to me because when your own father has dissociative identity disorder, mine doesn't, thank God, but there are other people out there that are suffering with that, and I don't want to make fun of that at all. But in the context of a thriller like this could be, what's crazy is you don't know who you're dealing with. Are you dealing with the villain? Who are you really putting away if you're that driven in getting your man?
Ironically, one of the projects I'm working on right now is about a schizophrenic musician murderer.
So, oh, crazy!
Yeah, crazy. So it's interesting who writes the music.
Oh, and that has just another ingredient to it that makes it interesting, I think, because of the fact that opens up some possibilities. Are you doing that as a work for hire, or is that just a spec script that you're trying to do?
It's just me. It's just me. I'm gonna try and I'm writing the pilot right now. My intent is to make like 10 episodes, 10 episodes, and then I want to see if I can film it, film it, festival it. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
2 suggestions on that. Then to have a look at. I know Joss Whedon's name is Mud right now, but Dr. Horrible.
Josh is one of my guys, man. I will never think ill of Joss Whedon. I don't know about him as a person, but his work speaks for itself.
Well, there you go. And honestly, I think the less we know about our entertainers and just enjoy what they make, the better. I learned that a long time ago. But Dr. Horrible Sing Along, I think, has a lot of those.
I love it. It's one of my favorites.
I think that's a good model. And plus, Felicia Day. Now, you want to talk about someone who got real.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
The Guild. She sold that herself, like on demand through Amazon, and like made.
And do you know what she comes from? Say it. Supernatural. Woo!
I think she'd been making that concurrently or a little before, actually. Yep. So
actually, she was doing a whole bunch of stuff on the side from Supernatural, and she built her whole brand. From being popular, from being same thing with John Cena. He knew who he was. He's making his brand. He's selling his brand, and now he's got all these amazing projects.
And that's inspirational. In fact, if anything, from a screenwriting perspective, you have to just whatever you're doing as a filmmaker, you have to establish yourself as a brand. I mean, just writing a screenplay is entrepreneurial in general because you have to have the end goal of figuring out how to sell it if you're going to do it that way, or if you're going to write and direct. You're still, once you make it, after you've had the experience of making that short film, that narrative film, you still have to have a marketing plan. You need a marketing plan to figure out how to sell yourself or to sell your film or to sell your screenplay, anything you're doing. And sometimes, I mean, it's just like with acting from your world in theater. I mean, actors have to audition, they have to show and prove. So, and that part of that is exhibiting and marketing yourself.
For sure. Yeah. That's why I stopped auditioning.
Oh, come on. You're probably better than you give yourself credit for. So remember.
I get awful nerves, I can, if there was an issue, say we were doing a show, right? Mm-hmm. And the lead falls and breaks a hip and there's no one else to replace them. I will go on and do the show, but if you put me in a room with people judging on another side of a table, that's not where I excel.
Oh, but that I would get to see you do that at some point. Not that I want somebody to break a hip so that you could do that, but just
I was talking about a geriatric production. That's why we were talking about breaking hips.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah.
Oh man. But okay, just to close this out on the Logline Thunderdome, where did we end?
I think you won. I'm going to give you this one.
I appreciate that. And now the work really begins. I got to come up with the next one.
That's right. That's right.
Crap. Oh man. But you know what? And Denise and I have been talking. We're going to do some new things this year too.
Yes.
We won't always have a Logline Thunderdome. Sometimes it'll be focused on who we're talking to. Sometimes we'll come up with something like the Screenwriters Drinking Game. I honestly think we need to do the sober up version of that. Like the Screenwriters Hangover discussion.
Let me tell you, the next day after that, I had very important things to do. Not many of them got done.
Oh Lord. See, when we record, it's sometimes a weeknight, and I've got kids in school, so I sobered up pretty early that night. I kind of had to,
Yeah, responsibilities.
Yeah, you got to pass it on to your kids, if you have them.
Truthfully,
I highly recommend kids, but I also recommend that you understand the responsibility before going into it. Just saying.
Just like a dog or any pet.
Yeah, exactly.
Not that I'm equating your children to dogs.
No, I didn't take it that way.
Hate now.
Oh man,
Okay.
And who was I reading about somewhere in the press that was it the Pope that recently said that if someone chooses not to have children, that's selfish or something ridiculous? I mean, I don't want to start any like controversial statements, but I can't say that I agree because if you want to bring life into the world, that's a choice that every couple or individual they got to make. And I don't want to judge anybody for any decision that they make, however they make it on that kind of thing.
Yeah. You just let people live their own lives,
Exactly. And that's the new beginning, right? When you have a new life in the world. So speaking of new beginnings, let's talk about our theme. Denise, you've got this whole thing outlined here. I want to check this out. I
sure do.
What's your delivery on this? Come on, execute.
So, wow, the pressure.
I shouldn't have said it that way. It's a little extreme.
So we're talking about New Year's, new resolutions. It's something that happens every January, just like,
And by the end of the month, it's all given up if you're talking about exercise.
For
routines,
sure. I'm still good on mine. I've been doing pretty good.
You know what? I am too, but that's the reason I don't believe in resolutions. I believe, I have an idea. And something like the last week of December here was really warm in Texas. Mm-hmm. Like every day it got to like the high 60s or low 70s, which isn't unusual of late. And climate change is real, yo. Yep. But that meant I could walk around my neighborhood, because when I do, nobody's really around. I'm 6 foot, distant from everybody or more, actually, most of the time. But I kept my workout up. I was clearing 2 miles almost every day, walking for 32 minutes. And 6 days a week, I try to do that. I said, I'm not waiting for the new year to, try to get an exercise routine continued, which I did. The holidays really hit you hard on that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's, don't wait for a resolution to do for you what you really should have been doing all along.
All along.
I take that. Yeah.
Agreed. And actually, the Babylonians agreed with you too. And that's actually where the concept of resolution started. They made promises to the gods in hope they don't good favor in the coming year. And the new year was actually not in January. It was in March when the crops were planted. So there was like this big 12-day celebration known as Akitu. And they would the tribesmen, the people, they would pray to the gods and say, like, please help us feed our family for the coming year and have, bountiful crops and all of that. And if they kept their word and stayed true to everything they had promised, they believed that the pagan gods would bring them a good crop. And if not, they would be out of favor with the gods and they would have bad luck. So I think resolutions has transformed into what it is today. But it was actually more of a promise to oneself. It started out as more of a promise, like, you know what, I am gonna take care of my family and respect my neighbor and all that. And if I do that, how about you bring a little sunshine on and give me some good crops so I can feed, and grow. Now it's more like you need to reinvent yourself every year, which I don't believe in. So, but for writers, there is some really good advice out there.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we should discuss.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, honestly, I think it's fair to course correct, make a refresh, take a different point of view. I mean, I think that's just fair on anything. But blind faith won't get you there, that's for sure. And there's resolutions for writers. There's things that you can set yourself up. Instead of calling them resolutions, it might as well just be goals. And it's the goals that almost all of us have in screenwriting, right? But more about not so much the writing itself, although in some cases it can be, but there's multiple here, like enter a competition a month. Screenwriting competitions, I mean, I don't know about you, Denise, but I probably get my inbox flooded in my email for like Screencraft's got one almost every month in a way, and I actually like Screencraft very much. I mean, there's festival season, so submissions are going on for multiple right now in terms of those that judge for screenplays, that sort of thing. This next one that you actually sent over to me, self-publish a book. I actually have some insight to help with this. You may remember a writer named Stephen Pressfield. He wrote The Legend of Bagger Vance, but he also wrote this great book about the art of war, which is basically it's a good book to write at the beginning. Well, it was a good book for him to write, of course, but to read for writers, it's like there with Stephen King's On Writing. To me, it is, because the brilliance of it is that it gets you thinking about, it's like chicken soup for the writer's soul in a way, because it gets you thinking about how you can approach getting past excuses. He calls it resistance. I think that's what he calls it. It's been a while since I need to reread it again, but he talks about it, about basically getting over yourself and getting down to the business of what you have to do, which is to write, right? Or and it's not the art of war, it's the war of art. The other thing, it's not the Sun Tzu publication. I think I mixed that up a little bit ago.
Yeah.
But Stephen Pressfield also, he has this entire self-publishing insight that he's shared with people. Initially, it was just a series of email newsletters where he gave some great information, but now you have to go to the website to get them, and little bits and nuggets are shared, and then if you're interested, you come in and you take a look around and you invest in that. But he's got this thing called StoryGrid, which helps you. It's meant mainly more for novel writing than it is for screenwriting, but I think it has applications toward the screenwriting craft as well. But one of the biggest takeaways I got from that is that you have to be your own editor if you self-publish a book. There's I'm gonna butcher the name of the very nice lady who wrote the 50 Shades of Grey books, E.L. James.
You got it.
There was a lot of controversy about the fact that she self-published. Not that she self-published, that's fine, and then the subject matter, I'm sure, has its own set of reactions from people. But there were some people who were like, well, this thing wasn't proofread. It was so hard for me to read because there were so many mistakes in it. And that's the thing. It's just like you have to have your own marketing plan. If you're going to be your own novel writer, learn how to be your own editor too. That's the big thing that Stephen Pressfield was talking about. So it's a worthwhile exercise. I think for us as screenwriters, we already have some work done on a script. Adapting that to novel is a different paradigm, and we'd have to shift ourselves that way and think about how we turn this into prose, because we're asked not to have prose in our screenplays. So it's gonna be one of those areas where we have to shift differently. But we also need to remember we have to be, and it's gonna be hell for me if I write a novel, because and in the past I've tried to write that way. You have to be your own proofreader. I mean, especially when you start getting to the rewriting piece. that part of it. It's like that to me, it's never been more clear that structure is very, very important in that, because if you don't know where you're going on the base skeleton, you can't go around and rewrite, and you can't self critique if you don't have this spine that's malleable that you can work with, because otherwise you can't edit, you can't revise if you're not at least somewhat organized.
That's true. And something that could help you, edit, revise, get that outside opinion is another suggestion for writers, which is joining a writing group or a writing community. I'm not in a writing group. I'm not opposed to it, but being on the road, usually meet like at a certain time, and I'm just not available. But I do have a group of writers from all over the world that if I have a script or I'm having a problem, I could just write to them and be like, hey, I'm stuck. Let me talk something through with you. And, the cool thing about it is that you give what you get. So I'm supportive to all of them. And they are supportive to me. It's a very symbiotic relationship, and I highly recommend it. Having other people that you can bounce ideas off of and voice concerns and, accentuate your problems is so helpful.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm big on growing your tribe. I know
Mm-hmm.
that's like buzzwords from other people who've done networking and can probably speak to it on a more professional level than me, but I've got one that I've built out of the MFA program we both graduated from. I've got one from the Austin Film Festival and friends I've made that are now on an international level, and some people that are just extremely inspirational at the craft and what they've been able to do. I've got a friend in Australia who's doing very well at getting her dreams come true right now. She's about to actually go down the writer director path. And people we know have been successful within the program at,
Right.
getting their work made and distributed. And, it's an exciting time for us, on the other side of being, having been in that program. But you can grow your tribe from almost anywhere, the writing groups, making new
Mm-hmm.
friends, things like that.
Yep.
And those are such great skills, but, networking is a skill. It's one I had to learn from my wife, because her craft is human resources. She's
Mm-hmm.
an ace in that field. And because of that, you get to learn a lot about, you get to see a lot of different behaviors, get to hear a lot about the different frustrations in the corporate world. But you also learn about when people go for a job and how they represent themselves and how they network to get those jobs, to move from one job to the other. That's a skill. And then learning that one, can make you more marketable. I think honestly, it's a good idea to be dynamic. Another friend of mine that I met through the Austin Film Festival calls it being a multi-hyphenate. So if you can do other things like, can you edit video? You can edit film, that sort of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And
Mm-hmm.
that's an option. Can you do title art? Can you do sound? Can you do copy editing? Can you do graphic
Mm-hmm.
design? And if you can do a little bit of everything. I never believed in the idea. I mean, Denise, what do you think of the phrase "jack of all trades, master of none"? I mean, we both have master's degrees, but we have all these other skills. Don't you feel a little insulted by that phrase?
Absolutely. I've always considered myself a Renaissance person, because I am capable of succeeding in many areas. But I think that makes me unique, and it makes me who I am, because I can do all of these things. And I'm not just, a horse with blinders on that is only going to see one direction. I want to see everything.
Absolutely. And honestly, you've got one of your many skills, and I know you're very, and speak to this as much of this as you want, but a big skill is, reading. There's a lot of opportunities for film
Hmm.
festivals or for screenwriting contests to be a reader. The script reader position in Hollywood is a very thankless task for
Yeah.
some. It's a very challenging one, even for the festivals. Yeah, but there's a specific way you can do that without having to go down that route if you don't want to do it from a professional standpoint. And you were speaking to that a little bit, even a little bit last year during the last season.
Yeah. I still read professionally and for friends. So I enjoy it. It's something that, you know, my career has led me to learn certain skills that that are beneficial as a script reader. I can read a script and tell you all these different things about it that the normal reader would not see. So I see like big picture, little picture. It's interesting. Um,
Yeah.
um, Script reading is probably not one of my favorite things to do, but it's something I'm good at. So, um, and everybody tells you, you know, the more you read, the more you learn. I understand it, but I only want to read good scripts. So,
Well, but I've heard the adage you really should read bad scripts because then you learn from that too. But I'm with you. It's like it. I mean, you can't say that, you know, if you go to your writers group and read their scripts, you're not going to say that it's
mhm.
bad because it's, you know, it's in the growing, right?
It's in the growing,
Um,
yeah.
so really, you know, is any script bad is the question, I suppose. It just depends on your point of view, I
Oh no,
suppose.
there are some bad scripts out there, man. I'll tell you. I'm not going to tell you what festival I read for, but whew, yeah, if I can't get through the first 10 pages, man, that's
Well,
that's
and
that's a challenge.
oh yeah, and it's, you know, and it's so tough nowadays because we've heard from the grist mill of, you know, reading and understanding this craft that you know, from time to time that it can be a grist mill because you hear about you, if I read one more line that says, you know, describes a woman as beautiful, I'm going to puke, that sort of
Hmm.
thing. You know, can we be a little more, you know, descriptive or eloquent? And then okay, yeah, but you don't want flowery language in your screenplay too, so that calibration's a little bit trickier than people want to, you know, recognize. But at the same time, that's why you read the good scripts so you can, there isn't a day that doesn't go by that I don't go to some of the screenplays I have physically and digitally to find out, okay, well, how is that action described? Like I'll go to a Christopher Nolan script to see how he described something from Tenet or Inception,
Mm.
and sometimes other movies. I get accused of liking older movies too much and not enough of the fresh ones. But recently, the Script Lab, and really, if you get a chance, dear listeners, definitely sign up for that because you can get access to some of the scripts they post. And I downloaded 5 John Hughes screenplays. I had to because that's my childhood right there. I downloaded Ferris Bueller's Day Off, The Breakfast Club, which has actually been made available in like a lot of theater literature, actually. Um, that particular screenplay, but also Weird Science, because that honestly, my top John Hughes movie, as much as I love all the others, Weird Science is probably one of my favorites. It makes the least sense, but it's the most fun. I mean, I wish I could rank beyond that as to, you know, because there's a lot of them that are really great. Christmas Vacation or Vacation. You want to talk about adaptation? Those were both based on stories that John Hughes wrote for National Lampoon. And what's interesting, I read this article that they posted along with the link for these screenplays, is that John Hughes actually worked on, you know, writing jokes for other people before he got to a point where he was writing his own screenplays.
Right. Yeah. And you can see it. You can see he put in that time and honed his skills because
Yeah.
it's clear in his scripts.
Absolutely. But he honed his craft with National Lampoon with guys like PJ O'Rourke and, writing, humor, because that's not easy at all. You have to have that vibe in you to do that. But if you are going to read for other writers, what's the big tips, since you have that professional experience on that?
Well, for me, it's a little different because I'll do whatever comes to my door. So, um,
Don't paint
uh,
it like that, because then
no.
every one of our listeners is coming at you.
um, but for in general, like just don't go too big. If you want to resolve to be a better writer, then reading is a great way to get there, because you can see what's working and like you can judge it for yourself. You know what, like in this script, I don't like the way they're attacking this situation. If I were writing this, I would do it this way. Well, you know what, you just learned a valuable lesson. But keep it small. Like if you can only do one a month, do one a month, and then put your very best effort into that one a month. If you can do more, do more. There's no shortage of people that will send you their script to read. So it's all up to you how you invest in that tool.
Right. And some tools you only get out of it what you bring to it. So
Absolutely, yeah.
like this next one you were going to point out.
So Jeff Goins, um, who is a writer on goingwriter.com, and I'm going to share that with you guys right now. He suggests to write what scares you. And this is a direct quote. There is something powerful about leaning into fear and doing the thing that petrifies you. Don't hold back. This is where you show all your scars. I 100% agree with this. It's something that, though it was not a resolution for me, it's something that I value. So, like the serial killer dark side of things is something that I didn't. It's always been fascinating, but it's something I've never actually investigated, and I'm doing that now. So that yeah.
I'm sorry. I was going to say that I think it's even simpler just taking that quote and approaching it from the idea of like, we all talk about what scares us, but we never remember it when we're going to try to come up with an idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's a good idea to, write it down or find some way the next time you say, this is what scares me, actually, write it down. Or if you have the presence of mind, does this hold any sort of seed from which I can grow a script or something like that?
Do you walk around with a notebook?
I don't. I think it's something I learned as I was developing skills as a songwriter. That for a long time, I co-founded a songwriters association in the county that I live in, and I learned a lot from one of my co-founders who actually was published as a songwriter and actually had a major band record some of his work, although that never got released. But one of the things he said, it was like, where do you get your ideas? How do you, put them down? We had a forum and talked about it. And I when I'm writing a song or if I have a lyric for a song, I will sing that lyric in my car when I'm alone driving and commuting, which I don't do much of right now. Over and over again. So for screenwriting, if I have an image in my head, I'm imagining it over and over and over again. And some ideas I just won't let go of, an image or a line or anything like that. And sometimes I try to jot it down. I tried to get all, which is the side of the brain that's creative? It's the left side, right? Or the right?
I don't know. I don't know. Sure, whatever you say.
Okay. Well, whichever side's the opposite, that's the side I'm using when I try to put that all in freaking, Excel spreadsheets or something to try to get all organized about it. But inevitably it comes down to the fact that if the idea has merit, I mean, it's going to stick in my head and I'll keep the memory. But when I start developing it and growing it, that's when I'm going to start doing voice memos or jotting it down any way I can, usually on the computer, actually. I actually have separate hard drives that I save. I have a folder for writing ideas where I'll start writing out the log lines for something and workshopping it that way. But I've found that workshopping an idea as a log line isn't necessarily the best because that log line is going to change by the time you're done writing the script. So,
I'm turning you around to my side of writing. Woohoo!
Well, and honestly, if the idea excites me, then I've got to go with it. I mean, at the end of the day, I used to go from titles, develop a whole idea out of the title. And I had an epiphany about 1.5 years ago that I really should be starting from characters. So a lot of my ideas right now, I'm trying to, pivot to, thinking about who the characters are and how I see them. There's one I've got that's a science fiction story that's basically, hopefully it's not that derivative, but it's a lot like Man on Fire. But I'm seeing it as the sci-fi Western, and I'm thinking about, okay, who would be a gunfighter on Mars and why? That sort of thing. Who would be this kind of man with no name drifter type, and what would put them in this position that they're in, and how they would develop a relationship that compels them to take this journey of how they change from being a lone gunfighter into somebody that wants to connect with society. So
that's pretty cool. Yeah, explore that.
Exactly. And so that's, but that's not something that scares me necessarily. Although, because anytime I think about it, anytime I'm doing something about screenwriting, as long as you're writing, whether you're writing in your head or coming up with an idea, or workshopping it, that's writing too. So you can call yourself a writer. You still have to actually freaking write.
Yes, for sure.
But there's something to be said for manifest destiny, right?
Yes, 100%. I mean, it does take commitment, and you do have to be organized enough to actually do the work. If you're just going to go around and read scripts and never write, then be a script reader. But if you actually have ideas and you want to conceptualize those and write to the finished product, then call yourself a writer, because that's exactly what you do. Put pen to paper, you're a writer.
Right, but the idea of having a notebook to actually put that pen to paper, that came from somewhere, didn't you? I think you suggested this a while back.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where it actually started, but Ingram Spark is one of the people that suggests that you carry a notebook everywhere. I've been doing this since I was like a teenager, and I'm not going to tell you how long ago that was, but
5 weeks ago.
Absolutely. I'm just a spring chicken. Carry a notebook with you. If you can't physically carry the notebook, you know what? Everybody has a smartphone nowadays. Jot it in the notes, record a voice memo, send yourself an email, send yourself a text. There's so many ways to harness that idea when you have it and get it down so you can refer to it later. I have books. I have books on books on books full of ideas, or ideas for this story, or ideas for that story, or a new concept. I wrote down 2 today. So,
well, and there you go. And honestly, read books on writing, but I recommend getting them digitally, because it's real easy to highlight and annotate if you can do it digitally, and then you're not destroying a perfectly good book in the physical form. That's I actually have 2 copies of Chris Vogler's The Writer's Journey, one that's very dog-eared, and I've got notes on posted notes on certain pages. Whereas the newer edition, I figured out there's a great review of it on Amazon.com. It says you just have to read this part right here. But this guy's gone to such effort to really keep revising and keeping people informed of really a very soulful journey for the writer, that having an extra copy doesn't feel bad to me at all. It doesn't feel like a waste.
A waste of a tree.
Yeah, I'm sorry. There are so many people I know that counter argue the whole paper industry needs, needs fuel. I'm like, well, let's not cut down trees. I mean, I think what I love about this either or kind of culture we're having to deal with right now is I go back to the Matrix and what the Oracle said. I don't know how we're going to get out of this situation, but we're going to get out of it together. So having this whole idea of either or has never made sense to me. This idea of balance makes more sense. Like, allow either side to actually have some consensus somewhere. It's not always going to work, but in some cases it does make sense to try to find that happy medium.
And that happy medium does exist. Specifically to writers, I think it does change for each person. There's no one can tell you how to be you.
Yes.
So, if a pitfall of making a resolution is going too big, mm-hmm. And I will say I was guilty of this years ago when I was younger. I'd be like, this is the new year, I'm going to do A, B, C, D, E. And then none of them would happen because I was making all these grandiose plans when I actually should have been making more specific things. One of the specific things for me this year is calling myself a writer. It's something that it's not even on my LinkedIn page. It's not on my resume. I don't call myself a writer at all. And I've had success this year as a writer. So you know what? I am a writer, and I'm reveling in that fact that I can actually call myself something that I've been working so hard for. But that's for me. That's something that I am just making that shift towards. If a lot of people are like, I'm going to write 10,000 words a day, or I'm going to finish 25 scripts this year. And that's something that's sure, if you can do it, that's great. But for the majority of us, it's too big. It's too grand. So break those down and do something like, I am going to try my hardest to finish this one concept by the end of the year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Break it down. Break down what works for you. You know you best. So figure that out and work
And
from there.
I've got another impression for you on that. You
Oh,
know,
yes. I'm
yeah,
ready.
Total Recall. You are what you do. Wait, open your mind. My wife used to get on to me because I would tell her, you know, when my son was an infant, he's 13 now. I've got a teenager in the house. God help me. Um, but when he was an infant, I told my wife, you know, I'm going to get like the Quato costume and he can be Quato and I
That
can
would be
be
awesome.
the other guy. My wife was, you know, about ready to slap me left and right on that. You are not making my child an alien of Mars. You're not making my child a mutant. She doesn't sound like that. That's not a good impression of my wife at all. But you know, and honestly, the pitfalls are exactly why I say it's better to have an idea or to not, you know, wait for a resolution to save you. Because, you know, I mean, you can set up in your mind something that's so, you know, you can set a standard that nothing will ever meet. And worse is like
Yes.
you're going all Captain Ahab and White Whale on, you know, hunting over a project. And if it's just not coming together, you know, I had to learn this the hard way in one of the thesis scripts I wrote in the MFA program we were both in, that, you're doing the work. And at some point you just have to say, okay, this, you've brought it, you've executed on notes, but it's still just not coming together because there's something there that you really need to evaluate. And the only way you're going to do that is to get a fresh perspective and move away from it. It's the same if you get a first draft in or another draft in. It's like you can lose sight of the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you can, you know, put band-aids on it, but you're really not letting it go. Instead you're like spraying, you know, Lysol and, oh great, now it sounds like it smells like a bear took a shite in a pine forest. Yeah, complete with like fumbling over my words
Yeah.
as fat bastard. But that's the other side of it, is like going, you know, it's like going too big, or, you know, or being so tightly gripped on it, but also
Mhm.
just doing nothing because you're afraid to even try. That's a huge problem for a lot of people
Yeah.
starting in this, because the expectations are so big, or there's such attachment to fame or to fortune. Once you can divorce that idea
Mhm.
from it, even though it's part of entertainment and it's really more about what do you have to say for the world,
Yeah.
you know. And once you've gotten into that seat of it, where I think a lot of people get to a certain point, like you and I and many other people we know, once they've been doing this a bit or executing on it a bit, um, you realize that it's not so much about the victory or the finish line so much as, you know, did you enjoy what you did at all,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah,
And
I feel like that a lot. I used to write with the vision in my mind that I was making this for other people. And yes, that is the ultimate goal. Like we all
well,
want
it's
to sell a
one.
script, right?
Yeah.
But for me, something that makes me happy and gives me fulfillment is, one, finishing the script, and two,
Accomplishment. Yeah, accomplishment's huge.
it is huge. And like, you know what? I told that story. I did that story justice. That to me is what gives me provides me the motivation to continue. You know, even if I never saw a script, I'm still proud of the work that I put into it.
Absolutely. And again, that's why you can like try to, you know, and try not to look at it as a failure, but there's ways to overcome some of those resolution failures, because, no matter how you came at it, you still attempted it, you still tried it. But once you've got something, you can start a new project, or you can write in a different medium, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
And there's other avenues you can pursue. I know some people say stay in your lane, but I like the idea of like combination lanes, if that makes sense. Like, action adventure, science fiction, action. I don't want to stick with one genre if I feel like I have something to say on a subject. I mean, I read once on a screenwriting group that I'm on Facebook, about somebody who wants to know what it feels like to write the kind of story where it's more soulful, where it's kind of like the Grand Canyon type of movie, where it's taking a look around and it's not so much about like the tentpole movies that I know, I like to, imagine and conjure and sometimes try to execute on writing. Um, and many other people try to do the same. But there's always something to be said for trying to find the tender bars of the world and try to write them, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. We all just need to learn about ourselves to be better people
Right.
for everyone else, you know?
Right. If screenwriting is about people, then maybe it's time to talk about, certain things that we can infuse universally into some of these, genres we like. I mean, earlier I was going to mention, write what scares you. There's some fundamental universal things that scare me, like Planet of the Apes, the 1968 movie, and the book is really, really good. But if you get the chance, read it. But one of the things that is so prescient about that movie is that the shoe's on the other foot.
Yep.
Humanity is domineered, and in 68, like right at the time when there was a lot of civil rights fights going on, and of course sadly that we're still having to deal with, there's fights that still have to exist. Unfortunately, we can't just all get along easily like I was hoping we would. Schoolhouse Rock promised me a future.
Just saying. Right.
Don't lie to me as a child. Now,
I'm just a bill sitting on Capitol Hill.
Well, that wasn't a lie. That's just something. Never mind. I'm not going to go political on the podcast here. But what's great about Planet of the Apes, or even The Man in the High Castle, is another great example. That's Philip K. Dick's story that was an Amazon series for a while.
Yeah, Amazon.
The whole shift and pivot, like it scares the hell out of people when they're on the losing end of something and have to survive and endure through it. And those are always interesting stories. So I always wondered if there was a possibility, and I'm sure stories like this exist. Like, what if you were persecuted for being straight? That sort of thing. Is it having somebody who is a complete misogynist, and has no love for the LGBTQ community, put them in a situation where they're made to feel less than human for being the very thing they thought the other side was, that sort of thing. To me, that's a scary proposition, when you're on the other side of, the losing end. It's like being in the apocalypse with all of a sudden you have all these gadgets, but what if they were suddenly taken away from you?
Yeah, and that's what makes us compelling as humans. And, writing about human nature is basically what we do.
Yeah, what do we do with this situation?
Yeah.
If we're handed this, it's The Hunger Games is a great example of that in many ways. It's like, what do you do if you're handed, the keys to your freedom, or how do you sacrifice, and what do you choose to do when you were just trying to save somebody's life? Plenty of military movies are about that sort of thing too, but it still comes down to the human being and what they do, what they choose to do on this. It's, let me ask you this. If from a screenwriting perspective, if we're talking about people and there's a certain amount of anthropology and psychology in this, did it make you want to study psychology a little bit or anthropology at all?
I've always been interested in anthropology, because I like history. So, I picked it as a genre to write. So,
right.
I always liked history, but psychology has been a new interest. As I start growing into writing different characters, I want to write their truth, and their truth might be something I'm not familiar with. So, doing that research and learning about psychoses of worries or confidences of other people that are not me has been absolutely interesting and liberating, almost, for my characters more than me. But yeah.
Well, what I love about that is that it brings this sense that as a screenwriter, I've always said that if you study film, you're going to be a student for life, because if you really love it, you want to learn more about what other people did and just what that does for you and feeds you as both a consumer and a creator. I'll give you a great example. We sadly lost Peter Bogdanovich recently. And he was big on, trying new ideas. That's how the idea French cinema inspired him. And that led to The Last Picture Show and how he made that, right?
Yeah.
So, and even there's guys like Paul Schrader, whether you love his work or hate his work, he's also a student of film because he's written papers and articles on film noir. So, and you talk to, Martin Scorsese. I'm not a big fan of the gangster film, and I know that's where he lives and breathes, but my favorite film from him is Hugo. And I think that's a beautiful film because it's his Valentine to the pioneers of cinema at the earliest inception of people who figured out how to do it and make it well and just created something beautiful from it. But even then, I think because of that's an ode, it's because Scorsese, learned the language of film. And that's the thing that I think as screenwriters, that's great, is that it's a continuing education if we want to study psychology or even, other movies to give us more ideas, because the more information you bring in, the more you can take that and learn something from it. And then who knows what you'll find out of it. How does it inform you as a creator?
Absolutely. I mean, we are. I don't know how to say this, and I'm gonna change my mind.
Oh, get it out.
What I was gonna say is, even if your thing is not, if your thing is, shoot 'em up, blow 'em up movies, that's fine. I absolutely enjoy those. I go to the movies to be entertained. That's not what I write.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm a quandary in that one. So, we all do not need to have master's degree in French cinema.
No, not at all.
You know what I mean? Like, I adore the industry that I'm in. I learn everything. I learn what I can when I can. But you also have to be truthful to you. Like, am I going to go back and watch black and white movies from 1902? Probably not. But I will watch a show. This is really bad. I'm going to watch a show on Netflix that somebody recommended to me because the writing was good.
Well, and that's still,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's still just as important. I mean, I honestly, going back to the early days of cinema, it's not always to everybody's cup of tea. It just, to have the curiosity and the desire to learn, I think, is enough.
No matter what it is. Yeah.
No matter
absolutely.
what it is.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's extraordinarily fair. I mean, sometimes character can be found in the most unlikely of places. If there's shows that you like, that even if, everyone else dismisses, but you love, if you look and think of it, go intentionally, mentally towards, having some sort of analysis about what you take from it from that perspective. There's a zillion and one movies I can't absolutely stand, but I can appreciate as a student of film and a student of screenwriting. Like, I absolutely think that The Thin Red Line is an awful movie. I think it's too long. I think it's pretentious. But the quality of making it, once you go behind the scenes as to the approach, talking about certain things, even if it's from a specific microcosm of getting it done, like the post-production side of it, which is not a microcosm, it's a very big part of it. There's always something you can learn about it from there. And even the story, there's the experience of war, which seemed to be a preoccupation for many people in the 90s and the 2000s, and to this day still. There's just, when even if you can't stand a movie, there's something about it you can pick up on that, there's things you can get out of it. And there's something to be said for bad movies.
Talk about bad movies. My favorite movies of all time are the original Sam Raimi Evil Dead movies.
Oh God, I love those, especially Army of Darkness.
Yeah. And the reason I love them, and they actually inspired me to go into film. That's actually what persuaded me to go into film, because they were entertaining, they were different, they told a complete story. I thought Bruce Campbell was like just brilliant. I'm like, oh my God, he flipped himself over. But the story itself, it's a story, and that whole concept, I was like, oh, this is so different. This is so cool. And I totally related to it. And now everybody's like, oh my God, those movies are awful. But yeah, there's lots of bad movies that I love that I think have merit, like Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Yeah.
It's so hilarious,
Oh,
and so expertly crafted that there's something good to come out from every project, even though it might not be critically acclaimed. I think if you get something out of it, then it was meant for you.
everybody starts somewhere, right? I mean, look at
Yeah.
Peter Jackson. He started with, government funded filmmaking like Meet the Feebles, which is basically Muppet porn.
Hmm.
And then years later, he's making stuff like The Frighteners and the Lord of the Rings
Yeah.
trilogy and the Hobbit trilogy. And I don't know if you saw, I mean, this is a guy who's big on trilogies. It's very clear. Even though I don't think that The Hobbit should have been stretched out into one personally. That's just my opinion. Doesn't mean I think any less of it. I still think they're really well made, crafted movies. And obviously to take Tolkien and adapt him and write him into a screenplay, come on, the man there's a reason why Peter
Yeah.
Jackson won an Academy Award for all this.
Yeah.
But he did this documentary on the Beatles called Get Back, and I actually watched it over the holiday. I have a newfound appreciation for the Beatles because I grew up in an Elvis fan household. My mom was a big into Elvis, not so much the Beatles. It's like an either or kind of a thing with certain people.
Absolutely. Yep.
And I still think it's interesting the personalities you see at the time. The first two parts were, really good, but by the end of it, you're like, how many times can I hear the same song recorded over and over again?
Mm-hmm.
But that's the process for people who write songs, and they were trying to do that within this time crunch, this time frame. They had to really work hard. And there was interesting how they got access to all this storytelling and all this music to be able to represent it. Because there's a long story about how the Let It Be album came into being, and what it was really like, and where the Beatles were at that time. So if you want to talk about people in a good study of like, and it's almost imperceptible, but you have to really invest and watch it to understand where they were going, where they were heading in their minds at the time. And it helps if you know a little bit about the history there. That's the only thing about that documentary I wish it had spent a little more time on it. You got a nice, I think, 10-minute introduction to the Beatles and who they were and what they were doing, but there was a lot. They didn't really speak to the fact that, that before they started recording that album, the, relationships were starting to get strained.
Well, let me just call him up and let me tell him of your disapproval.
Oh, it's not disapproval at all. But everybody's got an opinion. We all know what
yes.
Uh-huh. Yeah. But I'll give you another phrase going back to our theme here for this episode. There's a Marine phrase. Wish in one hand, shit in the other, and see which one happens first. My grandmother, my mom's mother, had a better version. Wish with one hand, work with the other, and see which one happens first. So
I like that version better.
I think a lot of people do. The Marines are out there. The military guys are like, oh, yeah, hoorah. And I did that horribly. So I apologize to every Marine everywhere at any given moment on that. I will never say that again, I promise. But God bless our men in service, right? And women. Everybody in the service.
Absolutely. Thank you for your service every day. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. But and I didn't know that my mom knew any Marines, so I don't know how she came by that phrase. But it's an old phrase. It's been around for, oh God, long before I came into being. So, but it's a nice idea. It just, it's like biblically speaking, it's the phrase, God helps those who help themselves, and, just don't help yourself too much. Like watching a whole bunch of canon movies like I did growing up, thinking, wow, why didn't this win an Oscar? Yeah, because Breaking 2 Electric Boogaloo is such a, piece of classy filmmaking. I actually love that's a guilty pleasure movie for me. If I'm, needing something that is brainless to turn on to just have a good time, it's part of my childhood had that because they ran that to death on HBO. I'm happy to check those and a couple of Chuck Norris movies while I'm at it, if I'm feeling like I don't want to think. But that sounds so bad and so cynical and so opinionated. I'm sorry, because people worked hard on these movies.
We were in a really good place. We were talking about resolutions and overcoming failures, and you just gotta
I just took it at a turnpike to hell. I'm so sorry. But I'm going back to your point about Sam Raimi and what he did with Evil Dead, because it started out being this. People probably could have dismissed the first one, but the second one was a brilliant retelling.
Yeah.
I've never seen any movie be outright horror slapstick,
Right.
and the different colors of blood flooding the shack was just hilarious in my opinion. Spoiler alert for people.
Also, if you ever want to hear something amazing, I'm sure it's on YouTube. There's a musical version.
Yes.
And it's brilliant. It's brilliant.
Oh man, even Bruce Campbell gave it a nice quote.
Mm-hmm.
It was on the CD. I remember seeing that available back when Best Buy sold CDs. Oh, the days.
Oh, the days, yes. But I feel like we've left everybody in a good place for the new year.
I sure as hell hope so after my opinionated crap.
And we have a lot of cool things coming up for this year. We have some new guests. Mm-hmm. We have some new things, new games, new events, new fun.
Yeah, Screenwriters Sober Up. That's going to be the sequel to the Screenwriters Drinking Game, if we can help it. We'll see. But if you want to find us and find out more about the upcoming episodes, check us out on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. And if you feel like being old-fashioned, you can always email us at tellingtheshow@gmail.com. Thank you to all of our new listeners. And, since you have ways to follow us and find us and email us, Denise, what can they do to, influence us?
Reach out to any of our social media platforms. I actually do have a shout out to another podcast. It's called the Campfire Podcast. They are brand new. These are, I'm going to call them youths that just graduated high school. They are, I'm going to say friends of the family, but they're doing some really cool things, and check it out. Check them out.
We may have to have them on the show then and see what, it's because, I think you can learn something from everybody, and even the youth, it's like, far too many people dismiss, what, kids are learning and know, because there's so much of them are learning things that, we're going to have a harder time catching up on, the further we go into our lives. Right. So, I mean, on the one hand, there are people that are like, don't do that. You're just feeding into youth-oriented culture. Well, let's treat them like human beings first, and then figure out if there's a reason to, reject the notion, if the notion should be rejected at all. So come on, let's give them.
I mean, there's something. Yeah. I mean, and they are the future. So
yeah,
we have to know them.
Well, to hear it from Whitney Houston, the children are our future. That's not our departing words of wisdom, though.
But to imitate Whitney Houston, I would need Kevin Smith Kirkwood to come on and do Whitney for me.
Oh, God, we need to see if that's a possibility. That would be funny, because if we're talking about impressions, I don't do a good Whitney Houston impression. I once did a really embarrassing singing Jessica Rabbit impression that I'm not going to repeat ever.
No.
I'm not going to repeat that ever.
Find Kevin Smith Kirkwood on social media. He does a Whitney show. It's amazing. Amazing.
All right. Yeah. I got to check that out. But with our departing words of wisdom, I feel like you already hit upon one from Jeff Goins. Do we want to repeat that or have a different one?
No, I'm sure you have something in your back pocket.
Okay. All right. But this is a quote from F. Scott Fitzgerald. I mean, if you want to talk about a writer, his personal history aside, but I think this comes from The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. It's called For What It's Worth. For what it's worth, it's never too late, or in my case, too early, to be whoever you want to be. There's no time limit. Start whenever you want. You can change or stay the same. There are no rules to this thing. We can make the best or the worst of it. I hope you make the best of it. I hope you see things that startle you. I hope you feel things you've never felt before. I hope you meet people who have a different point of view. I hope you live a life you're proud of. And if you're not, I hope you have the courage to start over again.
Aw, that's so sweet.
Yeah, and forgive my ham-handed delivery.
It wasn't heavy-handed. I enjoyed it. And that's me. That's my new year. My new year, new you.
Yeah. All in a nutshell. I mean, you want to talk about the ultimate character, about the newness of things. Benjamin Button. There you go.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, it's been a delight as usual.
Yep. It's always been a slice.
I'm going to do chocolate cream pie.
Nice. I'm actually
Yeah.
going to drink. I'm just going to go down a whole bunch of freaking water and try to avoid those chocolate covered pretzels left over from Christmas.
No. No,
And I'll
eat
probably-
them. Eat them. The only
See,
way for them to be gone is for you to eat them.
Shit. That's why the elliptical is my friend right now. Just saying. Well, it's nice to kick off a new season with you, Miss Denise.
Absolutely. Right back at you, Chris.
Okay. And everybody, we'll see you next time. Please let us know what we're doing, what you like, hopefully you liked it. I don't know if I can handle if you didn't like it, but we'll
I
work
can't
from
handle
there.
that kind of rejection.
Yeah, I'm gonna get all George McFly about it. You got 4 impressions in that total show there, right there.
I
Just
think
saying.
I'm going to need to make a new section of our social media accounts to track them all.
Yeah, I could just see the memes coming over social media. Listen to this fool and what he's doing.
Hey, you never know. Stranger Things have made people famous, so.
Yeah, sure as hell made those kids famous. Just saying, Stranger Things.
Right? Oh, I see what you did there.
Thank you. I'm here all week trying to feel.
Tip your servers.
Please.
All right. Until next week
All right.
or
We'll see
next time, we'll
until
see you
next-
guys soon.
See you soon. Thanks, everybody. Be safe.